This is Kate at the Library of Whispers. Today we're going to look at the subject of Norse mythology from this lovely book, the Encyclopedia of Mythology. Let's have a little look at the introduction. The mythology of Northern and Eastern Europe is essentially that of two main groups, peoples of Germanic and of Slavic descent. Today the former group includes Germans, Dutch, Danes, Swedes, Norwegians, Icelanders, English and any of their extraction, while the Slavs are made up of Russians, Serbs, Croats, Bulgarians, Romanians, Slovaks and Poles. Other peoples have also contributed to the mythological tradition of the region, such as the inhabitants of the Baltic shore, the Prussians, Lithuanians and Letts. Further north, there are contributions from the Finns and the Lapps of Sweden and Norway. The northernmost people of all, the Lapps of Finland and their cousins, the Samoyeds of Russia, are actually the scattered remnants of the Uralians, an ancient group once spread right across the tundra of Europe and Asia. Their beliefs remained similar to those held by the tribespeople of Serbia until quite recent times. For the purpose of this book, these traditions have been grouped together under the generic term Norse. It is a fact that the overwhelming bulk of mythology surviving from northern and eastern Europe is Scandinavian and Icelandic in origin. Most Slavic gods are not much more than names, and the little we know about their worship is essentially as a consequence of its Christian termination. In Russia, the conversion of Vladimir in 989 to the Orthodox faith involved the ransacking of pagan temples at Kiev. Fortunately, chroniclers of this event noted the strange worship accorded to the thunder god Perinu, or Veles, the god of flocks. Without such passing testimony, our scant knowledge would be almost non-existent. Even so, there are difficulties with Vladimir's own pagan beliefs prior to his conversion to Christianity. He was of Swedish descent, and the Rus state he ruled. On the river Dnieper was a byproduct of Viking exploration. It's therefore likely that the Slavic thunder god Perunu had already absorbed much of Thor's mythology. Although a native hammer god undoubtedly existed before the Vikings arrived in the 860s, the importance of northern warriors in Novgorod and Kiev made it inevitable that the Russian god would be identified with his Germanic counterpart. The strength of the Viking presence can be judged from the Arab traveller Ibn Fadlan's account of the ship cremation of a Rus leader on the Volga River in 922. In the Balkans, the Slav exists, although some idea can be formed of the pantheon. The brutal truth is that European mythology has escaped the Baltic fate only where by historical accident it was written down. In the case of Celtic mythology, we are fortunate in the care taken by Christian monks in Ireland to record the ancient sagas. The classical heritage of Greece and Rome was preserved like that of the Celts in monastic libraries, after the Germanic peoples overran the western provinces of the Roman Empire, and much of Germanic mythology would have been lost in its turn without the efforts of the Icelandic scholar and statesman Snorri Sturluson. At the turn of the 13th century, Snorri Sturluson wrote a handbook for poets on the world of the Germanic gods, providing detailed explanations of the old myths. He was recalling the sagas of the Viking era, approximately 750 to 1050, when a vigorous tradition formed around the heroic deeds of Odin, Thor, and Freya. Still untouched by Christianity, the restless and adventurous Northmen, the Danes, Norwegians, and Swedes, put to sea in search of plunder and land. Viking warriors were largely organised in small bands or ships, crews only joining together in temporary alliances for military expeditions, trading voyages, or piracy. They might serve under a famous leader for a while, and then break up again, although on occasion they built up armies or large fleets of warships, like the forces that attacked France in 842 or invaded England in 866. Their magnificent ships and expert seamanship gave them mastery of rivers and seas and enabled them to travel far and wide. The Irish lamented the Viking onslaught most. The sea spewed forth floods of foreigners over Ireland, noted the annals of Ulster, so that no harbour, no beach, no stronghold, no fort, no castle might be found, but it was sunk beneath waves of Northmen and pirates. In 836, the Vikings had decided to set up a permanent raiding base on the site of present-day Dublin. It is hardly surprising that aggressive Viking warriors loved hearing about the exploits of one-eyed Odin. This chief of the Germanic gods exerted a special fascination as father of the slain. He shared those who fell on the battlefield with Freya, the goddess of fertility. He also inspired the frightful berserkers, the shield-biting fighters who rushed unheeding and naked into the fray. When the Danish king Harald Wartooth complained about Odin's fickleness, the way he gave luck in battle and then suddenly withdrew it again, the war god said, "The great wolf watches the halls of the gods." Gathering to Valhalla, the heroic warriors slain in battle was the only policy Odin felt he could sensibly follow under the constant threat of Ragnarok, the doom of the gods. These dead warriors, the Einar Jarl, were desperately needed for the final battle on the Vigrid plain, where nearly all would fall in an encounter between the gods and the frost giants. Odin himself was destined to be killed by the wolf Fenrir, the monstrous offspring of the fire god Loki and the frost giantess Angrboda. Whether Harald Wartooth accepted this as an adequate answer is uncertain, since Odin, who was acting as his charioteer, flung the old king down and slew him with his sword as he fell. This is a map of treasures and talismans for gods and heroes. Some of their creations were exquisitely beautiful, such as the Brisingamen necklace. Others were supernaturally powerful, such as the silken thread which fettered the fierce wolf Fenrir. Most indispensable were the gods' wondrous weapons, Thor's boomerang hammer, Mjolnir and Odin's infallible spear, Gungnir. The tireless dwarfs were also innovative engineers who crafted a collapsible flying ship for Freya and a sword that fought of its own accord. Once drawn, most amazing of all perhaps were their living treasures, the gold-bristled boar, Colin steam, and Sif's golden hair which grew naturally. Some precious marvels were created by nature, such as the golden apples of youth. Among mortals, only Volund the smith could match the dwarfs in artistry and craft, while among sorcerers, the Finnish Ilmarinen excelled in magical craft and produced a peerless talisman, the Sampo. Norse Heroes. The Vikings were famed for their fighting spirit, facing death and doom with vigour and courage. Their hardy heroism was doubtless shaped by the crushing Nordic climate, but also by a stoic fatalism, while accepting the inevitability of death in the field and doom at the end of the world. The Norsemen fought with undiminished spirit. For the Vikings, word fame was everything, redeeming and surviving a hero's death. After death, the bravest heroes went to Valhalla. French sorcerer, developed his skills over a lifetime of search and sacrifice, much like a mortal shaman. Ever thirsty for wisdom and power, he wandered the 9 worlds as a vagrant, clad in a blue mantle and slouch hat, gathering and garnering every snippet of information he could find. After hanging himself on the world tree, he learnt the secrets of the dead and restored himself to life. By contrast, the heroes of Finnish myth were often gifted from birth with astounding magical powers and arcane wisdom. The wise wizard Wainamoinen was a born sage and sorcerer, while debonair Lemminkainen was bathed as a baby to imbue him with wisdom and sorcery. Equipped with a repertoire of sacred songs, the Finns penetrated to the roots of life. Finnish sorcerers were so famous that in medieval times Norwegian kings forbade people to sail to Finnmark for the purpose of consulting magicians. Tragic lovers. Timeless tales of tragic love are common everywhere, yet rarely so stark and bleak as in Norse mythology. Sometimes a curse lies at the root of the trouble, as in the tale of Sigurd and Brynhilda, where a cursed ring wrecks the lives of several pairs of doomed lovers. Sometimes the trials of love symbolize the battles of nature. Sigurd, for instance, might be seen as a sun lord, who, armed with a sunbeam, dispels darkness, while his lover, Brynhilda, symbolizes the dawn maiden, whose path